All right, so today we're going to break down what's happening in DC, take a look at some of the legislation that is being proposed, and also look at the impact around the world and what this might have in terms of the crypto markets, blockchain in general as an industry, all around the United States. And I think this is going to be a good one. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into TechPath. Joining me today is Mr. Ron Hammond, who's the Director of Government Affairs over at the Blockchain Association. He's been on our show before, but welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Always good to be back.
Yeah, so Ron, we've got a few things to break down into today. The first thing I wanted to cover was your tweet. This tweet right here, this week in Congress and crypto, 3 weeks, 2 bills, and 1 date, July 19th coming up. July could be the month that we see crypto legislation make its way out of committee and in line for the first ever House floor vote. All right, so is this a good sign? Are we seeing too much urgency here between the two committees that have started to formulate a new bill, or do you feel like this is moving at a good pace that we can get some real traction?
So to level set, there's 2 bills to take into consideration. There's the stablecoin bill as well as the market structure bill. The stablecoin bill, actually, ironically, we are almost at this spot this time last year. The Republicans and Democrats, and mind you, the Democrats controlled the House when they had the stablecoin bill last year, but they were working together on getting a framework for stablecoin regulation, largely in the wake of Terra, also concerns around Tether and the reserves. And so there's an idea, look, we need to work with the administration, Treasury, SEC, and other financial regulators to come up with a framework for stablecoin regulation. That effort, unfortunately, fell to the wayside right by the November elections. It typically happens in Congress when the election cycle is approaching. It takes up a lot of the oxygen in the room, and that bipartisan bill, even though it was bipartisan, went to the side. And so now we're seeing that effort with a Republican-led House, and it seems to be going in a really good direction. I actually am very optimistic on stablecoins in terms of crypto legislation as a whole. But pivoting over to the market structure effort, this is the other effort that involves 2 committees, the Agriculture Committee in the House and the Financial Services Committee in the House as well. That effort is a little more vague at the moment. It's a very complicated bill. I've been having a lot of conversations with members of Congress and staff on both sides of the aisle, and they're still trying to wrap their head around this very complex but very necessary piece of legislation. Basically, when it's a token security, when's a commodity, where's the SEC's jurisdiction ends, when's the CFTC's jurisdiction begin, and a whole slew of other provisions as well. And so the idea that if this gets a vote in the committee, which is the first step of many to get a bill signed into law, is a very positive sign. So we are optimistic, especially on stablecoins. We'll see what happens with market structure, but it's going to be a very busy month of July, to say the least.
Ron, do you think if the stablecoin bill does get, because it feels like it's a little bit more mature, ready to be voted on and possibly really be enacted into law, if that does occur, do you feel like the markets bill would be more aligned with a possible future, or do you think there's going to be continuous kind of, tinkering with the verbiage and the language of the bill?
A lot has to happen for the stablecoin bill, even though it does have a little optimistic of a path forward. But I do agree that actually there will ease the path forward for market structure if the stablecoin bill does get its legs underneath it. The Treasury Department especially has been very much involved in the stablecoin bill, and they've been a very candid regulator to deal with both on the Democrat and Republican side from the folks I'm talking to. Having their backing really does help push legislation forward. But as we know, the main problem usually is the SEC and Chair Gensler. That's been the main inhibitor, who has actually gone against some of the Biden administration regulators, saying that these are all in his jurisdiction, stablecoins, which we have come to find out the CFTC disagrees, the Treasury Department disagrees, but that hasn't stopped them from pontificating. And so that can make politically dynamics very tough, but they're on an island by themselves, all things considered, between the Republicans, Democrats, and the other regulators involved.
We were looking at, and we did a story on this last week or the week before in reference to Maxine Waters' letters over to Janet Yellen and also Chair Gensler. And essentially it was them asking for the potential of getting the SEC's assistance on being able to construct. Now, from what you know, there within the DC confine there, are you seeing that as a positive outreach towards the SEC to try to get them to come into some sort of alliance or alignment, I should say, with what the House is trying to do in terms of the language for this bill, or is this something else that's happening under kind of the political ploy of DC?
Yeah, it's curious on a couple fronts. First is that, like I said, it's a very complicated bill, and I mean, Republicans are asking for feedback from the Democrat administration, both Treasury and the SEC, and the Democrats are doing so as well, as we're seeing right now with those letters from Chair Waters to those agencies. What's ironic, though, or I was saying something to flag, is that on June 13th, Secretary Yellen testified in front of that same exact committee, in front of Maxine Waters, and said, "We need legislation not only for stablecoins, but for non-security tokens." She said tokens plural, indicating that she believes that there are more than just one token that is non-security. And then she also said we need something on spot market regulation. The SEC has pivoted from their 2021 view that Gensler testified, saying we need more legislation in crypto, to saying that there is no need for legislation. The rules are clear. And so Maxine Waters could have asked a question solely to the SEC and said, "I need your opinion because I just got this from actually very, very recently from Secretary Yellen's in her view." But she asked for both. I think that's important because it provides her a little bit, a holistic view, but B, some political cover in terms of what direction she wants to go. Because if they do conflict, which they do now, then she can make a decision for herself, what direction she thinks is most appropriate. And I think it's very important to highlight that she's taken both views into consideration, because she could just ask for SEC opinion only. And I would say that in that direction. But she's looking for a more open-minded view. So I think it's a positive sign.
So with that being the case, Yellen conflicting with the SEC and what Gensler has really kind of put himself out there on, where and who from the Dems side do you feel like, much like what you just said, giving a little bit of political cover, do you think we would see a large amount of the Democratic House start to maybe line up with what we've seen on the Republican side?
It's tough to say we'll get a majority, but I can see we're getting a couple folks already. We have Richie Torres, who's a progressive from the Bronx. Mm-hmm. We have Josh Gottheimer, who is more of a moderate from New Jersey. We've seen also folks like Kristen Gillibrand, for example, in the Senate, who is a Democrat, who's been very critical of Gensler on a number of fronts, including crypto especially. And so I think what's happening, and we're seeing this over time, is that Gensler's losing allies on the Democrat side. He's not gaining folks here. He's actually making a lot of enemies, both with the crypto industry, but a variety of other industries and financial services as well. And that's translating to likely him being stalled out in terms of another promotion or another position in the administration. There's been a couple of Democrats on the Senate side who they need to get their vote for, and they say, we're not going to support him next go around if he comes back again. Mind you, his confirmation was very, very slim already to begin with. So he's staying put for quite some time. And we're seeing it more and more folks on the Democrat side coming more to the Republican side in terms of being critical. But I will stress again, when the election cycle heats up, especially when it comes to the 2024 presidential election, it gets very partisan very quickly. Everyone retreats to their base camps to make sure that it's my team versus your team. And that's why for this legislation, even though the election's almost a year away, that's why they're pushing for it right now, because they understand they need bipartisan support and they want to do it before everything gets very hyper-partisan, especially in this climate. So that's why there's such a push right now from the Republicans in the House to get this done as soon as possible, because it is needed. And it is a very good bipartisan bill, hopefully. But there's a lot that still has to be done.
I heard Warren Davidson on a podcast here recently discuss the topic of crypto in general and the interest level of most of the congressmen, the House reps, et cetera, that are going to be running for office. And obviously during the presidential campaign, we'll start to see maybe some shift. RFK Jr. has been very vocal on it. But do you feel like this is a big enough front in terms of a political, stump topic to really make it into the mainstream from the voting base to really understand what's happening in the crypto and digital assets markets?
So I used to be Warren Davidson's crypto staffer years ago. So we were, you can say, the OGs back in the day on Capitol Hill in 2016, 2017 on these issues. So the good thing is that, like him, I've seen his colleagues on both sides of the aisle really ramp up from not caring about this issue to actually being very, very vocal for it. For crypto, it's not much of a voting issue we've seen so far. People are not going to the polls and saying, I am voting for crypto only. Abortion, the economy, and a whole slew of other issues really take precedent here. But we are seeing a lot of grassroots involvement, especially when it comes to issues like the infrastructure bill in 2021. I think we're going to see a lot of folks already talking about the central bank digital currency, which is somewhat tangentially related to crypto as a whole. But overall, he is right. I do believe that it's not as much of a getting folks to the polls, which makes it politically very difficult. And again, another reason why they're pushing for it tactically right now before the election cycle really dominates in the minds of all these voters. So I do agree with him. But I will finally say, we have seen the number of allies and champions on both sides of the aisle grow from around 5 or 6 in 2017, when it was just me and him working on this on the staff and member of Congress level, to having dozens now, both in the House and the Senate, being pro-crypto. And the anti-crypto army that Elizabeth Warren gets a lot of attention for, Brad Sherman, that's a pretty small number. And they're outnumbered very heavily, but there's a lot of undecideds.
Yeah, interesting stuff. With Maxine Waters, now she's been a bit notorious for doing some shenanigans, there on the floor. Do you feel like this could be the ultimate rug pull, kind of, or is she coming over to this side? And I say this side, meaning understanding what the future is really within the digital assets market. What are your thoughts there?
I think she is. And candidly, too, it's a very complicated issue. It's not her top priority. Housing is a very big, important issue for her. And we met with her years ago to talk about crypto in 2017, 2018. And she was, very want to learn more about it. Stablecoins, especially, she has said multiple times this year she wants to get that done.
Right.
So we'll see. I mean, if Maxine Waters does not get on board fully on the market structure bill, for example, there are still several other senior Democrats who hold a lot of weight as well. And I think it's important to watch those members. Like a Jim Himes from Connecticut is a good example. Again, I mentioned Josh Gottheimer and Richie Torres, Wiley Nickel. These are other Democrats who are already in the camp of we need legislation. And I think this is a good start to this bill. So I think she's going to come around, but not everything hinges on her. But she does carry a significant amount of weight when it comes to the future of crypto legislation.
All right, so a few things. We've been watching Patrick McHenry, the chairman's list of upcoming hearings. Nothing appears to be coming up soon. So the thoughts is when would be the next potential very strategic thing within the House that we would see around crypto and digital assets in general? In terms
So
of
Political read an article, I think it was recently, it said July 19th. That's why I put in that tweet that there's a public notice that there probably is going to be happening soon, a vote on crypto legislation, again, both stablecoins and market structure here. And so it seems like we're done with the hearings. We're done with the educational hearings. What do we need to know as members of Congress from the industry experts and those who are skeptics? It's now time. Let's have a vote on a bill. They put a bill out forward. They're working on it behind the scenes. We've had several conversations this week and last week with staffs on both sides of the aisle on this conversation or on this topic of bills. But it looks like the next step is a vote. And so we'll see probably early next week if there's going to be a vote happening in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month or two. But it seems like the hearings are done. We've had a lot already. I'd say a record number, candidly, this past year. And it's been only half the year so far. But it seems the time for votes is now. And so keep watching the House. That's where all the action is going to be. And it's going to also determine if the Senate has any chance of taking this up. Because the Senate moves a lot slower than the House. And it's going to take a lot of political and bipartisan support to get this going forward.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. Okay, so this was a fun tweet, but it has started to gain some traction, and that's Warren Davidson's tweet on Fire Gary Gensler. Kind of poking at the bear a bit, but the reality is there's enough interest in this topic of why is Gensler being so, defensive or ground grabbing in the sense of trying to, gain a lot of contention over what's happening in the markets, especially around crypto and digital assets. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that could Congress really do something at this level, or do you think it could just put enough political pressure on the administration to make a move?
I think you're right about political pressure. And like I said, the number of folks in the Senate, especially, again, that's the one who can either impeach or also moving forward in terms of another confirmation. That number of folks who would support him versus the last go around would be significantly less and probably below that 50 threshold. So I think, candidly, he knows he's pushed a little too aggressively on a number of fronts, especially in crypto. That's kind of jeopardized his political future after the SEC, depending on how long he stays there. Yes, I do think it is poking the bear a little bit. But at the same time, let's not forget, and he said this in a New York Magazine article very, very recently. The interviewer asked Chair Gensler, look, who is the person in crypto you respect? Look, there's a lot of innovators in this space, there's a lot of people doing well. There's a lot of fraudsters and scams, but who do you think is someone you look up to or you respect in the crypto ecosystem? And he said, next question, please. And that just shows you, for a technology neutral regulator, he has no positive views of this industry as a whole. Look, you don't have to be fans of all these companies or what their projects they're doing. There's a lot of smart people in this space who have dedicated their lives here, and he has frankly insulted them at this point. And I think that's why we're seeing a little bit of a going to war effort here in DC. And I'll end on this. I think he overextended with Prometheum, giving them their license, as well as the Coinbase action. We have noticed in DC that the narrative has really started to shift in the industry's favor recently, from both Democrats and Republicans, but also just the media as well. And Gensler loves the media and loves planting stories. We know where they come from. We know it's him usually. And he's starting to lose that war. And that's been very noticeable in the past 2 months. And it is very helpful to see on our end.
Ron, I get it. We, of course, analyze this and research this deeply here on this channel, and our team is pretty astute in being able to kind of sniff out where things are coming from. And to your point, Gensler does do some interesting things on social media. He does some interesting things on information release. But who wins for this? Is this something coming from Senator Warren's camp? Where is this almost defiance, and especially at the level that we're talking about now within an entire industry that has basically put this guy on the wall with a dartboard? What is causing it, and where is the political connection that causes this to move at the accelerated point that he's driving it?
I think the congressman from the Bronx, Richie Torres, said it best. Gary Gensler is a regulator acting like a politician. And that's exactly what it is. Politicians time a lot of their tweets for various political reasons. They try to maximize the media coverage to promote their agenda. But he's a securities regulator. He's supposed to say the facts and circumstances, balls and strikes. But he is doing a lot of underhanded things, again, in the media especially, but on a number of fronts, like suing Coinbase an hour before they were to testify on the market structure bill we were talking about earlier. These are political moves, very calculated, very obvious, candidly, that it's coming from him. We've seen a lot of plant articles too from a lot of his favorite resources to try to get his talking points and narratives out there. But like I said, it does seem like he's losing on a lot of fronts, and I think he really overextended on Coinbase. He wanted to go after them because they were really poking the bear, candidly, on a number of fronts, and he wanted to make an example out of them. We've been hearing that for over a year now, and I think he really overextended here, especially with Prometheum, and seeing how that has really unraveled in terms of that's not the story that he probably should have used as a talking point. They did a really bad job, candidly, on Capitol Hill when they testified. And so it's been exciting to watch the Democrats who, again, politically, you always want to back your own party, especially when elections coming up. They're breaking from their own party and saying, I think he's really doing a bad job here.
Interesting. All right, you guys did, this was by Jake Stravinsky and Marissa Koppel over from your team, and this was an article there on Chair Gensler must recuse himself from the digital asset enforcement decisions. A pretty striking article for you guys maybe listening to this on the podcast or viewing this right now. Make sure and check this out. Just go to the Blockchain Association, you'll find it. But what were you guys trying to achieve with this analysis? Where were you guys going with this?
Look, we've seen a regulation by enforcement approach here at the SEC, and it's been just hemorrhaging the industry. And a lot of folks are going overseas now and launching projects. The UK is welcoming in open arms, Japan, Hong Kong. These other jurisdictions realize that we're screwing here on crypto in DC. It's really sad to watch, unfortunately. But at the same time, like I said about the New York Magazine article where he said he doesn't respect anyone in this ecosystem, I think the time for niceties is away here, and I take the approach. You don't want to be too aggressive, especially to regulators or politicians. I think it's good to have a bipartisan agreement on things and to come in the middle. But he doesn't want to do that. He has pivoted from his position, saying he wants legislation. He has been aggressively going after members of Congress or companies in a very targeted and media-centric approach. And at this point, we're saying, look, it's full-on war at this point. This is what happens when regulation by enforcement takes control, and we're done trying to play nice here. It's time for us to be on the offense here. And I think for a regulator that calls balls and strikes, who has already prejudged that everything besides Bitcoin is security, I think it creates a little conflict there. There's what we do facts and circumstances, not saying this is what I believe, and therefore I'm right before all these court cases are even finished, like the XRP one, for example. So I think that's why we have really pushed through that approach.
All right, so moving out of DC for a moment, then we're going to go overseas for everyone that's listening and watching now. A landmark Senate hearing now set for July to address blockchain and digital privacy in Massachusetts. A couple of things hitting here. They're going to do an act creating a pilot program to explore digital innovation in government. This would also possibly go into establishing a special commission on blockchain and cryptocurrency. This is a state doing this, all right? within this, and we're starting to see more and more states kind of moving at this level, and then potentially going into the level of protecting private and electronic communication, browsing, and other activity via the idea of digital and blockchain utilization of this technology. What are your thoughts on how states are moving at this level? And do you think this will have any pressure on DC to start to take a look a little closer?
It already has, actually. The states are the ones we're seeing the most action in. Mind you, the states have a pretty compressed timeline sometimes. Like Texas, for example, they just finished their 6-month sprint. They're done for the next year and a half. But it doesn't matter if it's a red state or blue state. Massachusetts was where Senator Warren's from, the most anti-crypto senator currently serving in the Senate. We're also seeing other blue states like California really take the lead on trying to create a framework. The lack of federal action has led to the states saying, we need to do something here. Obviously, in SEC Chair Gensler's mind, the rules are clear, but even the state regulators have realized it's not clear. We need to have a framework here. Folks are being harmed. Customers are being harmed. FTX has happened. All these implosions are happening. And we think the regulators in DC are asleep at the wheel. So we're going to take a more proactive role here. And again, it's really exciting to see other states doing this, even if they are just task forces or they are just these small incremental steps. This is progress. And I would rather see that happening at the state level, and thanks to a lot of the state blockchain associations pushing that message forward, rather than here in DC where it is a slug. We are fighting on a number of fronts from a very aggressive regulator and a very tough political climate. But the time is now. We're seeing this happening internationally, where they're already passing frameworks. They understand the tech, they understand the future of the innovation here, and we're sitting on the sidelines. And I think John Carlo, from the former CFTC commissioner, did it best when he took a picture of the New York Times in Japan and said, the U.S. loss in crypto is Japan's gain. And that's so very true. We're seeing a lot of folks saying, I'm just going to go to the UK, Japan, Hong Kong. It's already starting to happen. And if I operate here in the United States, I'm going to get slapped with enforcement action, and it's going to hinder my business for years to come or be the end of it. And that's just not the risk that they're willing to run.
Well, we're going to talk about Japan in a second. I want to jump over to the EU. This was a leaked strategy, metaverse strategy, proposing regulatory areas around new global governance. Sandbox was involved in this, in Sandbox as a working center, not the project. But the Commission is going to support a creation of a technical multi-stakeholder governance process to address essential aspects of virtual worlds, VR, what we'll probably see in the metaverse. All of this now playing into the strategy of what is happening in the EU under MiCA. With that pressure, I'm just kind of curious, you get a chance to talk to a lot of lawmakers there. Are they mentioning what's happening in the EU right now as a driving force? And are they even looking at this as, hey, here's a little bit of a sketchbook that we could align with?
100%. Actually, MiCA even had a couple congressional staffers last year come over and learn from the folks who were behind MiCA, saying, look, this is what this looks like of creating a framework. These staff delegations happen pretty frequently, but this is the first time it was crypto focused. We're also seeing that from members of Congress who are being invited out to go see cybersecurity standards, crypto standards, and being educated from another jurisdiction of how to do this properly. And the biggest hindrance, like I said, with the market structure bill is it's complicated. But guess what? The EU has gotten their heads around it. Hong Kong's gotten their heads around it. And the idea that the rules are clear is not the truth here. And we're seeing that playing out in the markets itself. And so the funny thing is, a lot of folks say, oh, they're probably going to these shady Caribbean countries and domiciling there. It's no, actually, they're going to G7 nations. They're going to legitimate countries that have legitimate frameworks, not because they want to avoid regulation, because there is regulation. They know what they can and can't do. And that's been very eye-opening, especially on the Democrat side, when folks hear that people are going to France and the UK, because those are places very known as not having lax regulations, but they have regulations the US doesn't have.
Yeah. Not only in the EU, you also have this happening, obviously, in Asia. Hong Kong has moved probably, I think, the most aggressively. This was an article coming in from Animoca. Yatsu, he's been on our show a couple of times, appointed now to this Hong Kong task force on promoting Web3. And I was looking at the task force, and this really surprised me because I thought it was going to be a little bit of a softer. I'll zoom in on that a little bit. These are the non-official members, people within the industry. You see Yatsu there. And then you get into the official members. I mean, this essentially is the core architecture of the financial services side. You can see the amount of authorities that are really involved in this at a fairly high level. This is serious business now. I mean, these guys have really put together a star-studded team with a lot of pressure behind it from most likely the legislative and also the political and geopolitical standpoint. What does this do now that Mika's already kind of, shown what it's all about? What does this do right now? How much are lawmakers talking about what's happening in Hong Kong right now?
A decent amount. I mean, a lot of folks in Congress have business backgrounds. They understand Hong Kong from a variety of political perspectives. Also, most importantly, for engagement to China or in Asia. So there's some concerns on China. So there's some folks who are pumping the brakes on anything associated with Hong Kong. But it does show, to your point, that there's a huge interest from the actual government in bringing all the collective bodies together. It's not one member of the parliament or one member of a certain regulator. It is the holistic approach. We need to get a framework right. In the United States, there's a lot of regulators here, but that's been the huge issue, is that one regulator especially hasn't wanted to play ball and says, I don't think this should be something that we should really care about too much. But then you look at the other ones, they're saying, look, no, we need to have a framework for stablecoins. We need to have a framework for market structure. And we're not just seeing that all across the spectrum like we are in other jurisdictions. And that's having repercussions all across the industry. We're talking to a lot of our member companies that we represent, over 115 now. And the sentiment is pretty much, yes, we are domiciled mostly now in the EU, and we're looking to expand opportunities in Asia. And that's been really a recent pivot, candidly.
Interesting. So with the Blockchain Association, why not generate, a list like this, getting somewhat of an alignment here from the crypto industry and trying to build a task force, so to speak, at least in the sense, I feel like there's still a lot of effort being done by many companies, but it doesn't feel like it's come together just yet.
I agree. So when I worked on this issue back in 2017 in Congress with Warren Davidson, it was a hodgepodge. There were a couple of folks here and there from certain companies or trade associations. But I think we've matured, especially in 2022 and 2021. The number of folks, boots on the ground we have in DC has more than tripled, maybe 5 times more now. Where it used to be just like 6 or 7, now it's 40 lobbyists, policymakers, lawyers, who are all cohesively working together and communicating. So even though if they're not part of the Blockchain Association, we still coordinate with other groups all the time, crypto or not, to make sure we can get this all in one cohesive regulatory parameters here. And so it takes a lot of work, especially with our complicated rules and regulations. But there seems to be a lot of buy-in, both from the administration as well as Congress. The problem is, it takes a lot of political efforts to move things, as well as bipartisan support. And so that's where I think we've had a little bit of a hiccup on the education front, especially. But it's making a lot of progress here. It's amazing, though, what happens when you have one regulator really pushing the gas on the other end. But I think we're winning on that fight. But the longer we take here, the more we're going to be losing out as a whole. And that's been the main theme we're seeing. And it's pretty unfortunate, candidly.
Yeah, ending on that point, for many of the policymakers that are most likely going to be listening to this or watching this, because we find that a lot of policymakers actually watch our channel because we do so much of the congressional hearing breakdowns. We do a lot of that. I want to play one clip for you guys, and let's go to this clip right here. Listen in.
This is Duncan from Hong Kong Legislative Council. I'm representing the tech and innovation sector in Hong Kong. Happy to meet you all at the Ethereum Shanghai 2023. We already attracted 30,000 applicants to Hong Kong. This is only the things that we have done in the last 6 months. Hong Kong government will openly and embrace the technology development of Web3 and also virtual assets. And also in January this year, we started, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority started to have the announcements of the consultation regarding stablecoin development in Hong Kong. And then in February, actually, the Financial Secretary, again, in the budget, mentioned we will form a virtual asset development committee, which will be introduced soon, to talk about the development of Web3 in Hong Kong and the virtual asset definitions, future products and derivatives related in Hong Kong, and the policy, what it will be like. This month, we have the application open for a virtual asset service provider. So there has been quite a lot of applications in Hong Kong. Stage 5, we will have further upgrade in the legislation. we will need more corporate governance or the industry governance. We now have two current operators in Hong Kong, which is already licensed to trade virtual asset products. And things like NFT in Hong Kong has been clearly defined. If it's just for collection, just for trade purpose, and it would not be regulated and in Hong Kong. There's a Bitcoin ETF and there's an Ethereum ETF, and we can assume there will be more crypto or virtual asset related products, ETF, to be issued in Hong Kong. Of course, definitely they have to have self-governance, they have to have good corporate governance, transparency. How do they protect the client assets, etc., and etc. So hopefully there will be announcement soon that in Hong Kong we will allow retail investors in buying and dealing with virtual assets. Thank you.
All right, so I know that was a long clip, Ron, but I wanted you to see these are some of the research that we do on really trying to find what's happening around the world, and this really broke down a full strategy. I mean, they are way into this now. So my question is, can we catch up? Can the United States catch up with this kind of advanced movement?
So I've never seen that clip before, and it was disheartening to hear, they have things like a definition of NFTs. We don't even have that here in the United States. They have a Bitcoin ETF. We don't have that. We have futures. We don't have a spot yet. We'll see what happens with BlackRock and the others. And look, they have a detailed roadmap. They know where they want. Mind you, again, there still needs to be a lot of legislative input, but there has to be at least a task force identifying, here's what we need to do, and here's what we're going to do in the future. This is what businesses love to see. They want to engage with these policymakers. They want to make sure that they can domicile or at least set up business. And there are clear rules where they can and can't do, and gaps that they identified that need to be filled. We don't have that in the United States. And also we have infighting saying, actually, I'm not even sure the rules are clear or not. So it's disheartening to see that we've seen one country in particular really advances on so much. Now, the rebuttal I get from some folks here in DC is, well, look, they can come back to the United States when the time comes. We have strict rules and regulations. But let's look at the microchip industry. We have spent billions of subsidies to get these guys to come back to the United States. And it was a national security ploy mostly. Are we going to be doing that in a couple of years saying, oops, we screwed over years ago on crypto, and now there's a national security implication or a economic implication that's very massive and we're missing out? We got to bring these folks back. It's going to be a lot harder than currently right now putting rules and regulations in the books. And so that's what I'm most disheartened by. And I think it's the idea that, look, the time to act is now. And we've been banging the drums in Congress for quite some time. And some folks have been getting it, again, on stablecoins mostly. But it's still unfortunate to see some folks say, actually securities laws from the 1930s are actually really clear. And that's what, they had in consideration for this technology, when every other jurisdiction says, yeah, that wasn't the case. We are going to put new rules and regulations to tailor make to this technology to make sure customers are protected. Not just trying to make some free-for-all situation, but actually have some really clear guidelines. And that's been the unfortunate truth.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the thing also that many people forget is that the real people that are harmed here are U.S. citizens. These are people that, potentially could be participating maybe in the first real level playing field of investing in something that has ever existed out there, especially in the financial front, outside of real estate and some of the even more difficult things to get into. I think this has a bigger impact on, unfortunately, the rising class here in the United States, which, right now, if you think about it, those are all the voters. I think if they really understood, most people really understood what was happening in crypto, this would be a completely different painted picture, because now they're going to look around the world and go, why are all our brethren out here doing these things, from their own personal investments and winning? And here in the United States, we're pretty much oppressed into not being able to participate in this area. So that's the area that concerns me the most.
Well, it's tough when you have a regulator who says, I don't believe in anyone that works in this industry is actually a true innovator, and also says that I don't see any real value out of this thing besides Bitcoin, maybe. Everything else is just nothing at this point.
Yeah.
When you have a regulator who is telling the American people and Congress that's the case, when he differs from literally everywhere else around the world, you're fine with one hand behind your back here. So, I keep stressing, this is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. There is one man, and he is causing a lot of political backlash here that's having some effects on his political futures and after this. So we'll see, who's right. But I think the other countries and the vast multitude of those who have realized the power of this technology versus the one United States that has not is going to be the losing end here.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So last point right here, you guys are holding a Blockchain Association event, the Policy Summit coming up here in November. So kudos to you. Is this mostly going to be members of the association? What's going to be the goal here at the Policy Summit?
Yeah, so we hosted this last year. It's actually a really good intimate conversation with Hill staffers who are behind a lot of the legislation in the works right now, policymakers both in the administration and in Congress, and then members of the Blockchain Association. So it's a great event. It's right in the heart of DC. Actually, it's going to probably be happening right when stablecoin probably, if it does go forward, will be in the Senate hopefully at that point. Market structure hopefully will be in the Senate at that point too. So a really pivotal time in terms of crypto legislation. 2024 is going to be a little bit slower than 2023 for crypto legislation, again, because of the election. But I highly recommend folks to look into it. Please reach out to our team. We would love to have you folks there. It's going to be a great event and a lot of media folks as well too. So great coverage and great press. So hope to see you guys there.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely give you guys a ring on getting up there to DC, because I feel like this is a big opportunity to really get in front of what's happening in DC and around the industry as a whole. Ron, it's always good having you on the show. Thank you so much for stopping in today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
You bet. All right, so you guys are tuned in maybe on the podcast side of things. Make sure and jump over here to the YouTube channel. Listen, you get a chance to get into our deep dive research here, and this is one of the things I think that separates what we do here on PBN from pretty much every other channel out there. And sometimes I like to brag on our team because they do an excellent job on finding some pretty amazing stuff. So make sure the best way to do it is just subscribe to the channel. That's the one way you can appreciate what we're doing. And of course, if you want to catch live streams that we do most of the time every day at 3, hit that little bell. And of course, if you guys want to reach me, catch me out there on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.